Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Kirshner. I'm the Director of Planning with the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation and co-chair of the NCPTA Training Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar this afternoon. We're going to give it just 1 or 2 more minutes for some folks to log in. Thanks again for joining, and I'll be back with you in just a second. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, I am back. I had some technical difficulties on my end, but I think that I've got everything back. Blair with NCDOT is a co-host here. Blair, if you can't see my screen or can't hear me, please let me know. If not, we're going to assume that I got my technical difficulties straightened up and that everything else will go smoothly the rest of the afternoon. So again, welcome everyone. This is part of an NCDOT Public Transit Division and an NCPTA Lunch and Learn series. This is our second in the series, and today we have some guests from up in the Minnesota area, Southwest Transit. We'll get into introducing them in just a moment. Again, my name is Mark Kirshner, and I'm with the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation, as well as the co-chair of the NCPTA Training Committee. Just a little plug for NCPTA. If you are not a member or engaged in our state association, I encourage you to do so. Our website is up there on the screen. Myself and Rodney Harrison with Salisbury Transit are part of the training committee. NCPTA has been putting some emphasis on training and professional development over the last couple of years, and we are glad that we have this partnership with NCDOT. Also, a very quick plug for our 2019 conference that will be coming up. It will again be held in Wilmington, and the dates are April 29th through May 31st. The first couple of days over the weekend, the rodeo is the main event for the conference, and then sessions and topics get started on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If you are on the NCPTA listserv, you should see here within the next week or so a call for sessions. So please, if you think you have a great project that you'd like to talk about, or if you have some ideas for topics, we would appreciate getting that information to help shape a very strong agenda so that everyone that attends is getting some good information. A little bit of housekeeping. In the chat box, if you could please, if you are with a group of people, if you could put where you're calling in from. So for me, it'd be PART, or you could be calling in from DOT or from GTA, and let us know how many people are listening in with you. This helps us evaluate the success of these webinars and helps us keep account, good performance measure for the webinars. So just in the chat box, list what agency you're with and how many people are listening in with you. We would greatly appreciate that. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we will manage that through the chat box again. We will do our very best to see your questions and give those to the speakers and have them address those. We do record these webinars, and those recordings are made available online, and you should get a notice about that about a week after the webinar in case you want to go back and view it again, and we put that out there for people that might happen to miss the webinar. And then I'm going to go ahead and give a quick plug for our next webinar. We will take the month of December off, and we will come back on January the 8th with creative engagement strategies, mixing it up, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that whenever we wrap up. So today's lineup, we've gone through some of the housekeeping chores for the webinar. In just a second, I'll turn it over to Debbie Collins, who is the director of the NCDOT Public Transportation Division. She'll talk a little bit about today's discussion, as well as speak to the OLLI project. And then myself and Eric Landfried with Go Triangle will set the stage just a little bit for the presentation and give you a little bit of context about what we're hoping to achieve today. And then I'll turn it over to our friends at Southwest Transit, Dave Jacobson, who's the Chief Operating Officer there. has a 35-year career in public transportation. Congratulations and thank you, Dave, for that. And I'll let him introduce his A-team that he has with him when we get to that point of the webinar. Then we'll go into the Q&A, and then I'll talk a little bit more about January's webinar. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Debbie Collins.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're so excited to have launched this series and feel it's really important. And as you think of topics that you want us to talk about in the future, we're always open. And if 2 months, one every 2 months is too few, too little, we will engage in more frequent sessions if that's important to you. So I'm going to talk first about the OLLI project, and then I'm going to talk about why it was important to me for you to hear from Dave today. So as we know, OLLI is Local Motors Autonomous Vehicles, and the department is trying to work and has had several webinars and encourage each of you, and if you need information, just reach out to me. But to put in best use cases for where we might use an OLLI in North Carolina, they are going to give 10 across mostly the eastern United States, it appears. And so we want to look like a state that is interested in innovation and technology, and we need as many use cases as we can identify. So we're working on lots of them. Some of them are in the Newbern, Beaufort, Okotoks, Greenville, hopefully the North Carolina Zoo. We've got lots of people working on just use cases. It is not an application yet. They're going to pick the state off of these use cases, and then we will make an application to compete for one of the OLLIs. So please, November 28th is the deadline, and you send the information to Amanda Good at Kenley Horn, and I'll have Blair send that information out again, because we want as many use cases as we can identify and write up. There are some limitations to the technology. That's why it's important to look and make sure that your use fits the technology in our presentation. So it's been for a couple of years, I've been hearing about this wonderful transit system, and I have to say, I can't say it correctly, but I wish I could, Minnesota, that is doing so many wonderful things. And this summer, I had the opportunity to hear Dave present and to hear what they're doing, because one solution is not going to fit all cases. And we've been transit organizations across the state have been operating in fixed route environments, as that is our primary means of providing mobility. And I think what you're going to hear today, and are going to be so fortunate to hear, is the creativity of this organization and how they are doing many things that are just as important to us, connecting their communities to Minneapolis, to providing local mobility in suburban environments and rural environments. So, Mark, I guess I turn it back over to you, but Dave, we're so thankful that you've agreed to join us today, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Debbie.
All right.
To help further set the stage, a couple weeks ago at the NCDOT training conference there in Chapel Hill, there was a presentation that both Eric and myself were a part of about microtransit. And I just wanted to go back and touch on that one more time very quickly, because part of the theme here is understanding this new world of mobility that we're in, not being afraid to take risk, doing some things that are different, trying to understanding our market and see what can best happen. So I'm going to let Eric share just a moment about what they did, and then I'll share about what PART did.
Thanks, Mark. Again, my name is Eric Lanfried. I am the Transit Service Planning Supervisor for Go Triangle. For those who are not familiar with us, we are a regional public transportation agency connecting up the 3 main counties in the Triangle area. which include the cities of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary, and some other towns. At the heart of our service area is RTP itself, which is Research Triangle Park, which is a very large, very, very sprawling office park, about between, I think, 40 and 50,000 employees, depending on who you talk to. So it is a pretty significant job base, but again, the land use around it is very difficult to serve with fixed route transit. We have been serving it for, probably going on 25 years now, as best we can. The image on the right is a map of, actually, I'll get to that in a second, but that's sort of the general RTP area. On the left is our shuttle system that we used to have in place up until about a year and a half ago. That system really ran as these 4 fixed route shuttles that ran during peak times only, and they connect down at, if you see sort of the bottom of the page, it's a little hard to read on this, but that's our regional transit center. So we have regional routes coming in from Raleigh, from Cary, Apex, Chapel Hill, Durham, other locations that feed into that transfer center, or transit center, I should say. A lot of people then transfer to other routes, including these shuttles that go through parts of RTP. The ridership on those routes has dropped pretty precipitously over the years, and up until a couple of years ago, that was really the lowest productivity services we had in our system. So we were spending a lot of taxpayer revenue on these routes that really were not carrying very many people. So we worked with, we actually got a technology grant from NCDOT to implement an on-demand system to essentially replace the shuttles. And our goal was to try to either increase ridership. We were getting about 120 a day total. That's between peaks. And we were trying to increase it to about 200 a day, or essentially provide a similar level of ridership, or gain a similar level of ridership, but reduce our overall cost so that we were providing service more efficiently. To cut to the chase, we have been doing that for, again, a little over 1 year, and worked with Transloc, which is actually right across the street from us, using their technology and their mobile and online platform to provide this on-demand service. We do provide it ourselves. We directly operate the routes, and continue to use bus stops. So it's a stop-to-stop system, not door-to-door. Again, cutting to the chase, we've really seen an overall drop in ridership, even from previous levels. Now, again, we were seeing that drop beforehand, so we don't know what the counterfactual here is, whether that would have continued to drop on our fixed route service. We did start offering it in the middle of the day, which we had hoped would attract some lunchtime trips, or other types of trips within this zone. And the zone is the thing that's outlined on the right side of the screen. And we have seen some more direct trips. So a lot of our, again, before our system, everything was pulsed in and out of our regional transit center. So the vast majority of trips were people connecting to and from regional routes. We've seen a pretty big shift in that. We've lost a lot of the ridership from our transit center itself, and a big reason for that is that it's very difficult to time the connections, which happen every half hour at our transit center with the on-demand system. That was a lot easier with fixed route that had a set schedule that we could make sure that the buses got back to the center in time for people to make their transfers. That guarantee really went away, and there's we've been trying to figure out how to improve that, but that's been very difficult. We have seen a small increase in some of the more direct trips within the zone, so other stops outside of our transit center to employers or commercial areas, but it has not made up for the loss of ridership from our transit center to those major employers. So that's where we are. We've been doing this for about a year. We are now looking at making adjustments to this. I think we've generally come to the conclusion that this is not working overall. we're putting in the same level of subsidy and getting fewer riders. So, when you boil it down to that, you really need to look at making changes. I still think it was a worthwhile experiment, but it's something that, especially with the type of system we were trying to run, where we have this pulse at our transit center, it's just really a model that doesn't fit with sort of microtransit or any sort of on-demand service. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions, I can either take them now or at the end. I don't know, Mark, how you want to handle that.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. We'll hold on to questions for you and me till the end as well. For part, our core service are connections between Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point, and much like Eric was talking about, those three routes come into our terminal, which is essentially right here, kind of in the heart of the Triad area. And people transfer buses and then head on to the next city. Our shuttle system, as shown there on the other side, was a demand response system, and we changed to a fixed route system. We were having some challenges with our drivers doing a 30-minute circuit to get back to be able to meet that 30-minute pulse that these three routes met. And we investigated in some technology as well, and no one could help us solve that from a technology standpoint and still meet that 30-minute guideline that we were holding on to. So we actually decided to go into a fixed route system and did our due diligence in terms of we had a lot of data about where people were going to. So the routes were pretty apparent when we looked at our APC data and developed that fixed route system there. Before, we had 4 areas that we were serving demand response. We did have to add a 5th area that went pretty much exclusively to the airport terminal there. But our ridership overall has been increasing a little bit this year. This shuttle system is really dependent upon the Greensboro Transit Authority, High Point Transit, and Winston-Salem Transit Authority systems, putting people into our routes that connect the cities, and then the shuttle system. So kind of as their ridership goes, our 1, 2, and 3 route ridership goes, as well as ridership within this shuttle area. But as I mentioned, our overall ridership is up about 6% so far this year, and that matches in with the shuttles. We were very hesitant to make this change, but felt that it was something necessary. So again, I think part of the message here as we turned it over to Southwest Transit is you have to be thinking about different ways to solve that mobility challenge that people are having, meet your market demand, and you can't be afraid to try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. So with that, I'm going to ask Blair to switch the presentation controls over to Dave and Southwest Transit. And again, Dave, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you and let you introduce your team, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate Debbie. It was great meeting you up here in the Northland. Mark and Eric, I also understand the challenges because I think every transit system goes through those types of challenges, trying to figure out what's best for the whole community. I'm going to start out with a real fundamental thing. For those who don't know, we're a suburb geographical area of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. You know, St. Paul, home of the state capitol, voting day, and of course the Minnesota Wild hockey team for those who enjoy hockey. Minneapolis, that's these are all going to be sports because those are the ones you probably see on TV, but home of the Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Twins, and perhaps the worst Division I football team in America, the Minnesota Gophers. Over to the left in the green geographical, or not, in the green area, those are the communities that Southwest Transit serves. We've got Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, Chaska, which is our joint power cities. And we also provide service to Carver under contract, and you don't see the name on here, but also to the city of Victoria. That's our prime service that we serve out there. Before I go any further, I'm going to make some quick introductions. Matt Fighton, who is our senior planner and kind of go-to guy for a lot of this stuff. We got Charlie Cochran, who wasn't in for the Minneapolis APTA presentation, but he's kind of the brains, a lot of brains in the outfit. He's a planner. We've got our intern, who is going to be leaving us in a few days because she's got a bigger and better job, God bless her, Emily Weber. And then again, like I said, I'm Dave Jacobson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer. So, before we get into our micro transit service, I'd like to kind of tell you a little bit about who Southwest Transit is. Like I said, we serve these 5 communities. We're a public entity that was created by the legislature back in the mid-'80s. Our big provider, Metro Transit, serves probably about 80 of our communities. These opt-out services that Southwest Transit is, they opted out of the Metro Transit or the core service area because back in the day when these decisions were being made, they were on the property tax. And the property tax that was coming out of our 3 communities far exceeded the level of service. And that also happened in some of the other neighboring communities. And these opt-out communities were created. Southwest Transit provides over 1 million rides a year. You know, it's not the biggest thing in the world. But 90% of our trips are fixed route, and then 10%, before we knew what they were called, but, you know, before we knew that it was microtransit, we had a dial-a-ride program, and it started to take off. So 10% of our current ridership is on our microtransit/dial-a-ride service. Vast majority of our ridership is Park and Ride Express. I want to go back to this map real quick. There's a highway here, this 212 corridor that goes right between the middle of our green boxed out area. That's kind of our lifeline. We have Park and Ride facilities in Chaska, in Chanhassen, and then in Eden Prairie. And then they haul them up to downtown Minneapolis to work or to the U of M. Let's see. So that's the vast majority of our fixed ridership. Through this prime process that we call it, or the micro transit process, we've realized that, you know, the midday fixed route or the evening fixed route isn't quite as successful. We'll get into greater details later on that. Southwest Transit also holds multiple real estate holdings. There's a picture in the lower right there of our Southwest Transit station. That is our flagship. And in the words of progress, is going to get knocked down for a light rail station, or a co-ed station of light rail and fixed route. Interesting dynamics. We were also the first suburban transit-oriented development in the region, because what you don't see around this station is a lot of it's housing, apartment houses, and retail. We have 1,000 parking space that's adjacent our Park and Ride facility, and of course is the largest we've got. We've won a bunch of stuff, and the motto is expect the best. That's what we try to do each and every day. Our fixed route service, like I said, there's a beautiful skyline of Minneapolis. It serves, like I say, the southwestern suburbs, as I pointed out, downtown Minneapolis, the University of Minnesota. We also provide service to the Golden Triangle, which is on our eastern edge of our service area, and we're going to get into that a little later. Matt's going to talk about some of the things we got on that we're planning in the future. And that's a high employment area, by the way. We also look at Normandale Community College, which is in Bloomington, a surrounding suburb, our Best Buy campus or corporate headquarters, which is also surrounding, and our Southdale Mall. We go to that as well. Our largest Park and Ride is located in Eden Prairie, like I mentioned. We do about 3,700 rides per day. Our average subsidy per passenger is $6.50 per passenger. This measure, we're going through a process with our legislature and our Met Council, which is oversees all of our little services, and we're trying to get somebody to maybe add a mileage component to it, because the subsidy per passenger on a 1-mile route versus a 30-mile route is different, plain and simple. We've got high amenities to retain choice riders. Most of these people, we'll get into some demographics later too, are very, we got $100,000 plus household incomes, and we try to capture them with high quality vehicles. Something serving our prime service and kind of replacing our reverse commute is something that we call the Southwest Flex. In essence, it's a route deviation. We have 2 trips are operating in the morning out of downtown Minneapolis. That operates more, at least coming out of downtown, as a fixed route. And the 3 return trips in the afternoon/evening are also. But we also have flex options. So there's certain geographical areas that the buses will flex to go get someone to take them to their destination. The zones identified to flex within include regional transit connections, high employment areas, you know, the usual planning stuff. Service began in 2017, and currently we're not banging the doors down, but we're doing about 150 daily riders. Here's a couple of pictures of our, now we're heading into our prime and discussion of our microtransit. Prime is, I'll keep saying prime because that's what we call it, but it's the microtransit service. We've got, you know, all sorts of vehicles ranging from an Equinox, we got vans, we've got cutaways. Some are accessible, some aren't accessible. So back in 2015, we thought we were pretty cool. We thought it was the first of its kind. Ride microtransit service in Minnesota. Service began in 2015. And what's kind of different about this is we can request a ride on demand only. It's Uber-esque or Lyft-esque, but it's shared rides. So we have no advanced scheduling. For the senior housing, we're going to go curb to curb. It's very simple. It's general public. We're serving all of our cities that we've identified, and we also serve Southdale Transit Center on Saturdays. That's a big deal for us because we typically, being a peak express service, only go Monday through Friday during peak periods. We stumbled onto RideCell, our software. We've talked to Transloc a lot too, just to let you know, your neighbor. And this RideCell is taken care of. We've modified, not with, especially Matt and Charlie could tell you war stories about trying to modify the software to meet the needs that we are looking for. But to this point, we're still sticking with RideCell until they find another shiny thing to go follow. So why do we come up with Prime, or why are we doing Prime? There was a need for lower cost local service option. The 2 times rule. It's all about subsidy. We're back to that. The legislature watches it very closely. We didn't want to be more than twice our subsidy, our fixed route subsidy. And this is where you come, like we talked about earlier. Prior attempts at traditional circulators, demand response services were cost prohibitive. That's code for, yeah, they stunk. We tried them and they were losers. Increase in demand for the first mile and the last mile services, that came about because we've got a lot of employment out here, and we wanted to get their workers as part of, you know, the community, their workers to their work sites in a reasonable amount of time. We also needed for local service with minimal staff support. You know, in the good old days, you had dispatchers galore trying to make those rides. And now with the technology evolution, we're able to minimize the staff time, the dispatcher content of it, and rely a little bit more on technology. We also, based on, one could probably surmise, on our higher income areas, that this group is a very tax savvy area population. Fortunately, we've tried a lot of things, we've dumped a lot of things, but we have a long track record of service innovation because we've tried so much. Our CEO comes up with about 4 ideas daily, bless his heart, and it's willingness to take a risk. And this is a very critical part here, this willingness to take a risk, because the staff can come up with the greatest plan, but you have to have your board, your commission, your whatever you call it, your governing board, to also go along with you on this deal. They want to take the risk with you, or need to take the risk with you, because if they, they're the type to have a quick finger to point, it's all your fault. You'll be a short timer. But it's a joint effort. We've got staff, we've got our commission. They understand what we're trying to do, which is very fortunate. There's the mutual respect for the staff and the commission, which is very helpful. And that helps us build a great, an opportunity or a good laboratory to try some things. And when stuff starts working, we're happy to share. Oops, I went the wrong way on that one. All right, so this will be my last slide before I turn it over to Charlie. This just kind of give you a little feel, again, once a little geographic of it. This red line are the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Oh, just Minneapolis, I'm sorry, just Minneapolis. And that just shows you the city size of Minneapolis versus the city geographical size of our 5 communities. In addition, there's also population related things. Minneapolis is 4 times the size of our 5 cities. It's I don't want to say half, but it's a lot smaller than our square miles. So density out in our area is a big deal, especially when you're planning for transit services. Minneapolis, especially as it's downtown, has well over 300,000 jobs. Out in our area, we've only got a little over 72,000 jobs, but yet as you go through the metro area, those 5 communities, that's pretty high. Our median household income is over 100,000. I'm going to say it's well over 100,000, well beyond that. And in Minneapolis, the average income is 73,000. So again, it kind of gives you benchmarks as to what our area is versus the high density of the central city. Now I'm going to turn over to Charlie. There you go, Charlie. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So Dave kind of gave you the broad strokes there, and I'm going to get into kind of the smaller details on how Southwest Prime, the service, actually kind of works here. So first we'll start with the customer-facing side, is that if you do want a Prime ride, we have 3 methods to do it. You can do it the old-fashioned way by calling in. We also have an app that's embedded in our larger Southwest Transit app that you can reach it that way, or you can do it by your computer. Now with the software we're using, from the moment you book your ride, about 20 seconds later, you'll have a driver en route to you. So with the technology we have, it's very efficient. Customers also get a text or phone call, depending on which they prefer, to notify them that a driver is indeed en route to them. They can use this app to look at the actual vehicle and track it. And upon the driver getting there, they get a text or call, again, whatever they prefer, to let them know that the driver is there. So how does this look? We have the app screen view on the left, we have the customer screen view on the right, and again, going back to the kind of Uber, Lyft sort of model, from the customer end of things, it's very simple. So you can see from the top there, you have, okay, where am I at? Where would I like to go? How many people do we have? How am I going to be paying? We also have the option to leave comments. So for example, we would get that with, use the south entrance instead of the west entrance, things like that. So it just kind of ensures that everybody's on the same page. And then you also get just a quick view that if I want to book my ride, I can see down at the bottom that, okay, the average pickup time is 10 minutes, just to give the rider some understanding of what the ride is going to be. So that's the customer-facing side of things. This is the dispatch screen that a dispatcher / reservationist will see. So on the top here is the same fields that the customer sees. So when the dispatcher gets a call, they can enter in the phone number, the name, all the same information, and do it that way. And then from here, they have all the information they need. So you have the pickup and drop-off addresses. We have who the rider is. I blacked out the information, but the phone number is listed above or below the name there. So if there's ever an issue or communication is needed, the dispatcher/reservationist can reach out directly to the rider. From here, the dispatcher can also assign which driver he would like to perform the trip. He or she would like to perform the trip. And Dave kind of alluded to it, but Matt and I in particular have worked with RideCell to customize a few features, and one of those is the color coordination you see going on here. At the beginning, it was all just white background and black text, and if you're getting a certain amount of rides, it can be kind of convoluted to whoever's running the system to do it effectively. So we came up with this color coding. So red, it stands out the most. That means your rider is underassigned. You better pay attention to that and get that going. Blue means that the driver has arrived, but the rider is yet to get on board. Orange is driver's en route, and green is that the customer is on board, and they're getting to their final destination. Another thing with this is that under this actions column, the dispatcher can actually go in and perform actions that the driver would do in case there's ever a software issue or anything like that. They can perform the pickup, they can do the arrival notification, and that. They can also choose to cancel a ride. They can declare it a no-show. Basically, the dispatcher has full control of the system just through this screen here. There's a live page, that live map page, that it's useful to give just kind of a quick picture of what's going on with the system. And again, we had some customization with this, but the color coding of the riders. So you can see that a green rider means that they are assigned a driver, and then a driver is en route to them. There's no orange riders on this map, but that means that they have booked a ride, but they have yet to receive a driver. And we have some color coordination with the drivers as well. So you can see that a black driver is busy, a blue driver is free. And so again, it's just kind of a quick look to how is this going? How can I route this? And
let's go back to the last one for a second.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is Matt. Just I want to add a couple notes to what Charlie was talking about there with the dispatch screen. Just some things that we experienced and maybe some helpful tips for everyone. We talked about the color coding piece with ours, just kind of not so much a tip, but as the system gets really busy, the amount of unassigned rides can start to get pretty high, which ends up creating quite just a red screen, which one of the unintended consequences of that for us has been red's kind of a stressful color and tends to make our dispatchers tends to be a little bit difficult. So that's just kind of a funny unintended circumstance that occurred. But what I really wanted to touch on was the driver assignment piece that you can see under the driver column there. The RideCell software that we utilized for the service, when we first started it, that software allowed for completely automated assignment of drivers, which obviously in a perfect world, that would be great in terms of efficiency, the amount of resources needed, making it really easy on the dispatcher to the point where you may not even need a dispatcher. That's all good and wonderful, but we found when we implemented the service, given the surface area characteristics that Dave went through, being really more of a spread out suburban area, this software was really developed for a more dense urban area. At the time, I think it was developed for a competitor to Uber in the San Francisco area at the time. So the algorithms behind the software really didn't match with our service area characteristics. So the automated dispatching of piece really didn't work for us because the routing just wasn't making sense a lot of the times. And so what we did on that driver column there, as you can see, there's a drop-down arrow for each ride, which actually allows the dispatcher to manually assign which driver is going to be with which rider, which we found increased our productivity in terms of driver arrival time up to a 50% increase in productivity on that front. So just kind of a heads up that you may be sold that this software is going to be able to do everything for you, but we found that the human intervention piece is still something that we found was still very much needed. Certainly, hopefully the software improves, but that's just something to note. And I know that we had similar conversations with Translope as well, and I think they even added that feature after conversations with us. So that's just what I wanted to touch on. So, thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And then Yeah, Matt actually reminded me. Another little thing I forgot to mention on this, small deal, but under that notification column, we can see that, a phone call did occur, and it gives you the time that the phone call did occur. And you don't run into this every day, but you have you have a no-show ride, and the customer says, well, I never got a call. So that's useful for that aspect. Well, actually, you got a call at 8:26 or, whatever that is. So that's a small thing there. Okay, so then I showed you the live map, just a broad view of what's going on in the system. That's our entire service area there. And then you can actually go into each driver's assignments just to see exactly what that driver is doing. So you have the name of the driver. You can see that number there is the capacity of their vehicle and what they have at that time. And then I can go, okay, so in this case, Mohammed, what is he doing? Can I put another trip on his bus? And okay, it looks like he's dropping off somebody here, he's dropping off somebody there. So I can get just an exact detail of what the driver is doing and how that relates to the rides I have in my queue and how I may best route those trips. So some broad information here is that Southwest Prime is available Monday through Friday, 6:30 to 6:30. We don't take reservations after 6 p.m., and that's to ensure that our drivers get out on time. Saturdays, we restrict the hours a little bit, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and we include Southdale Mall. The reason being there is that that's a big regional connection for transit within our, near our service area. So we don't have fixed route operating on Saturdays. That gives people a way to get out from Minneapolis or anywhere else to get in and to and from our service area. Something we stress is that each ride is booked separately, meaning, so if it's $4 per adult, it's going to be $4 there and $4 back. $3 for kids between 6 and 12, free for kids under 5. We have a senior day on Monday that is very, very popular. They really like that. And then as far as connecting to express services, we don't charge any additional fee for that. And this has been working for us, and some of the reasons why is that from the back end, so for our drivers, we have an entry-level operator wage, so seniority or anything like that doesn't factor in, and that helps us keep the cost down, keeping it efficient. The technology we're mentioning, RideCell, minimizes the booking time, allows for just one dispatcher to oversee the entire system. Matt kind of touched on that automatic driver assignment piece. The bus technology that routes trips fairly efficiently. And then we also have different payment options. So you can pay cash on the bus, you can have a credit card associated with your profile online, and you can pay that way. We also have, we work with Square readers, so you can use a credit card on the bus as well. Another customized piece, we work with RideCell. With such a big service area we have a transfer in the middle of our service area at a park and ride called Southwest Village. Very nice amenities, indoor waiting area and all that. And that's so we can keep vehicles tied to a certain location. So we don't want to have one vehicle taking one person 30 miles. It's just not very efficient. The reason it says off-peak is that we actually found, we used to have this going all day. We have more vehicles during the peak, so we found that not having the transfer during the peaks was actually more efficient, but during midday, when we have 5 or 6 vehicles out there, then that midpoint transfer becomes very important. The no-show policy, we give it 3 minutes from the point that the driver arrives for the customer to get there. And if we have a lot of riders, so if they don't get out in 3 minutes, we do have to keep moving. If the rider does have a no-show, they're placed on a list, and we make sure that they pay for that no-show ride before they're able to book another ride.
See, I want to jump in here, just kind of expand a little bit more. This is Dave again on the entry-level operator wages. We were able, our drivers, we contract with our drivers, their First Transit, and we were able to negotiate, they're Teamster drivers, so they're part of the union. So we were able to negotiate maintaining an entry-level wage with them to keep the costs down for the van or the Prime service. So the Teamsters agreed to it. Otherwise, you'd have these senior drivers that would be picking these 8-hour shifts to drive smaller vehicles out here versus, driving a coach to downtown Minneapolis through the construction zone. I'd much rather be driving this prime service out here. So we realized that, and we didn't want all of our senior drivers out here because we want them on our very difficult service, which is our commuter service. So again, we approached First Transit, the Teamsters. They thought it was okay to do that, and that has proven to be a big cost saving. So that's a very important piece about all of this. Just want to jump in and just kind of elaborate a little bit on that.
Yep. Okay, and then I have 2 more slides, and I'm going to pass it over to Matt here. So this was actually last month, a record-breaking month for us. Our average ride time was about 15.5 minutes. Average wait time was about 17.5, which if you consider the size of our service area, that's pretty good. Again, record-breaking average daily riders at 450. Our passenger per in-service hour just above 4, where the regional standard is about 2? Yep, something like that. We use peak buses, about 12 of them during the peaks. Average subsidy per passenger is about 8, which lines up well with that it shouldn't cost double the express. And
just a quick note on that, our regional subsidy for a demand response service, obviously not like this because this is the only one in the area, but generally looking north of $12 to $13 per passenger. So it's quite a bit more efficient.
Yeah. And the ride booking method, in the beginning, the phone was overwhelmingly the majority, maybe 80% on the phone. And as time has gone along, the people are maybe understanding it more or trusting it more that the online app or computer is a viable way to do that. So we're at about 60-40. We hope that online keeps going up because that just makes it a little more time savings on our part.
So I got one other thing about the picture here of the vehicle. We've got our ADA provider in the metropolitan area, and they usually run these vehicles this white vehicle you're looking at. Still has the Metro Mobility number on it, as a matter of fact. It'll run at a minimum 300,000 miles, well beyond its useful life. We were so short on vehicles, we were taking whatever we could. And of course, when it comes to funding, there were no expansion dollars allowed by our metropolitan planning organization. So you take whatever you can. We wrapped it up and did whatever we could to keep that ball rolling. So that's another one of our vehicle types that we use.
Okay, and then last thing here is that another cool thing about this software is that when a rider is dropped off, they have the opportunity to rate the service they just received. So you can give 1 to 5 stars, and this is all the responses we've ever gotten from the start of the service in June of 2015. And as you can see, 86.7% give us 5 out of 5, so we must be doing something right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Fighton.
Thanks, Charlie. So really, with having this prime service in place, we started thinking a little bit more broadly in terms of our services and how can this demand response microtransit model start to more effectively serve us in other areas that we may have seen lower productivity. Dave mentioned that we tried every circulator, tail, whatever you want to call it under the sun, that just hasn't been efficient enough. So what we ended up doing is actually taking the prime concept and integrating it into some of our other services. For example, we have our flex service, which is our reverse commute service. We actually have it set up where the fixed route, flex route will actually meet with a prime vehicle on the eastern end of our service area and serve the lower density western end of our service area by essentially just allowing people to walk onto the prime vehicle, simply give their location that they need to get to, whether it be work or an errand or whatever the case may be. And that therefore allows it to be a much more quicker ride for that individual than we used to have an old meandering reverse commute route that went all over the place and took forever. So it ends up being a more direct service for the passenger and also a more efficient service for us. Not to mention that we're able to measure it differently from a metric standpoint, where we can, as I'm sure many people on the call know, that just the metrics for demand response service are a little bit more forgiving than your standard fixed route metrics, whether it be subsidy per passengers or passengers per in-service hours. So That's worked for us on both the passenger front and on the metrics reporting front. We have another similar setup with actually connecting with Metro Transit to a suburb of us, ours in the north, Minnetonka. We connect with some of their services in a very similar fashion to what I just explained with our Flex route. And we also began offering a shuttle service between our primary station, Southwest Station in Eden Prairie that Dave noted, and Normandale Community College, which is our largest community college in our area, the neighboring suburb of Bloomington. Again, kind of offering that demand response service area, but gearing it towards that Normandale piece, which allows us to, again, report it in a different fashion, which allows us to take what was an unproductive fixed route and really make it a productive demand response route. So what's ultimately next with the Southwest Prime service? We're constantly, as Dave mentioned, we got a CEO around here that keeps us on our toes, so we're doing our best to think ahead in terms of what our service expansion opportunities are with the Prime microtransit service. Certainly looking at hours of operation, as Charlie said, our last pickup is around 6:30 or so. Looking at extending those hours later into the evening, potentially. We already have Saturday service in place, but looking at having the Saturday service be later in the evening. Looking at Sunday service as well. Just general service area expansion. We know there's a suburb here, Shakopee, that's the southern suburb for us. Looking at expanding there. One of our interstate corridors here is I-494. We have actually some grant dollars that we're going to be expanding service using the Prime concept along the 494, which is going to be kind of a hybrid of what we're doing now, allowing both scheduled and demand response rides. And then also looking at, and that 494 service also should know, it will go to the Mall of America, the airport, pretty large regional centers for us. Looking at potential TNC partnerships with Lyft, Uber. We actually currently have a partnership with Lyft right now that allows for, if the passengers experience longer than average wait times, they can actually receive a code from us that will allow them to get a Lyft ride at a discounted rate. The results of that have been not so great, just because really our experience with Lyft has been, they're just ultimately not the most responsive group, and trying to get a hold of them has been difficult. So that's made it difficult to administer that partnership. So I'd be surprised if that continued throughout the year or after this year. We're looking at demonstrating electric vehicles on the Prime service. As that technology evolves, we certainly will look to add electric vehicles. In fact, we almost introduced a Tesla Model X to the service as a demonstration, but due to some procurement snafus, I'll call it, unfortunately we weren't able to do that. And
on Tesla's part, I want to make that
Tesla's
clear.
part. Yeah, there we go. And then also looking at AV demonstrations for the service, both in certain service areas, and I think as the technology for AV vehicles expands, certainly the Prime service could be all autonomous down the road. Another piece that we're really looking at in the near future here that we'd like to get rolling in the next coming years is a service that we're calling Southwest Prime MD. That may or may not be the final title of the service, but again, really expanding upon the Prime service model, but focusing it solely on non-emergency medical trips. I'm sure it's the same in North Carolina as it is here in Minnesota, that as the baby boomers are aging, populations are aging as well, and there's really a high demand for these non-emergency medical trips throughout service areas. So we're looking at partnering with medical facilities in and around the Southwest Prime service area that will allow for scheduling rides to ensure that people are meeting their medical appointments. But then on the return trip of the rides will operate just like Prime does today, where people will get done with their appointment, they will essentially call Prime or use their app to book a ride back, and we'll be there generally within, as Charlie pointed out, 15 to 20 minutes or so on average. And we've been really floating this idea with the medical facilities themselves, and they're very receptive to it and see a lot of partnership opportunities. There's really a lot of enthusiasm behind this idea, so we're excited to hopefully get this off the ground next year. I mentioned the autonomous demonstration or autonomous possibilities in the future. Dave mentioned we have our largest business district here is actually it's called the Golden Triangle area in one of our suburbs, Eden Prairie. It has it's the largest suburban jobs concentration in the Twin Cities area. There's 20,000 plus jobs, 9.8 million square feet of office, commercial, industrial space. Again, that's about 9% of all office space in the Twin Cities, so pretty significant for being in a suburban market. And also on this picture here, you can see there's a green line going through, which is actually going to be a future LRT line that's planned for operation in 2023, I believe, at this point. So as rail is introduced into this area, we expect the densities to also increase as well, making it even more of a viable area to really pilot something that could be an autonomous demonstration. Because if you look at the map here, it's still very much a suburban land use. I mean, we're talking 1-2 story industrial or office spaces. While there's some high density buildings, it's pretty well spread out. There's not a great pedestrian network in terms of sidewalks. You can see the road network meanders all over the place. So we're really looking at this as being an opportunity to introduce an autonomous shuttle in an area that really is, the speed limits are relatively low as well. So we're working with our Department of Transportation on getting some dollars for that once LRT shows up in that area. And with that,
yeah, that concludes our show. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us at least, and we're still honored to have been asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, guys. Thank you very much for sharing some great information there. Let me go ahead. We've got one question in the chat box. If you've got questions, and you can type them in there, we're going to do our very best to keep track of those. The first question that came up was, how do you obtain the daily rider feedback?
So each day we get a couple of reports sent to all of us, one being just how many trips and the metrics, times, and everything like that. And the other report we get is just this feedback report. So that's emailed to us every morning.
Okay. So when someone completes a ride, I think you mentioned too, they have a chance to rate the service, same way you do like with Uber or Lyft?
That is correct, yep.
Okay.
So they can give us a 1 through 5. They also have they can put in comments. I failed to mention that. So.
Okay.
See that.
Do people share rides?
Do people share rides? Yes, it's a shared ride system.
Yeah, otherwise, we can't do it on any other way and make it cost effective. It's got to be shared ride.
Yeah. Do you have any sense in terms of the nature of trips? Are they work-related, medical, shopping?
Yeah, it's we see most of our ridership in the peak hours, and so yeah, it's primarily work trips. But I mean, just the nature of the service, yeah, it varies. You see a lot of doctor's appointments and shopping and that sort of thing. But I would say it's primarily for a work commute.
and we've done some surveying of trips, and I think it was about a quarter of trips were making connections with our fixed route services as a first mile, last mile service.
Okay. Two very similar questions about the connections between the Prime service and your fixed route services. So how are those working out? You may have heard both Eric and myself talking about that's a critical piece for things that we've tried here.
They work fairly well for the most part. I mean, you're going to run into complications no matter what. So I would say it works well. Part of that is that with it being on demand and having a bus leave at a certain time, we stressed this from the start is that if you have a doctor's appointment or a bus trip you need to get to, let us know an hour in advance, and then you might be early, but we'll make sure that we get you in time to do that transfer. And there's that sometimes doesn't work out, but for the most part it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more related question back to the feedback. So the the person asking the question understands about completing it online, I assume that there is some sort of tablet or some device that the driver has that's giving his routings and things like that. Is there any chance to provide feedback on that device, or is it all through the app?
It is all through the app. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the buses, what do we put, iPads?
Yeah, and to answer that question, yeah, each vehicle has an iPad that shows the routing and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you get any private partnership revenue?
Not at this point. We're trying. You always try to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Could you expand on trying just a little bit? How are you trying?
We're trying to connect with as many businesses as we can for all sorts of reasons. And, it's interesting. We've got these services we're trying to provide. We're doing it on this Prime MD now, going to hospitals and such. They're a little easier to get into. But I'll tell you, trying to get in to talk to, the CEO or the finance director or the HR director, everybody's got a guard at the front door, and they perceive you as a solicitor, when in fact, trying to help them out and provide them something. And we're not real, or at least in my opinion, I don't know how to crack that nut. I mean, we try to use our commission members and partnerships or relationships that some of these folks have. That's probably the best way to do it, but it's been a tough one for us. Minnesota nice, they smile at you and then they don't listen to you.
Well, I think I can only speak for myself, but I would say that we have the same challenges here. We're known for our southern hospitality down here in North Carolina, but we always don't get it when we come knocking on the door. It is a very tough thing to try to get into. Got some question related to the other first and last mile options that people have, and that is, do you work closely with local governments on pedestrian improvements? And then do your prime vehicles allow bikes on board?
Second question, they do allow bikes on board. It's actually, it depends on the vehicle, but how the service, we forgot to touch on it, but dispatch, and you can actually know when you're booking a ride as a rider, whether you have any mobility needs or need a lift, or need to have a bicycle. If you just note that, we'll make sure that a vehicle is assigned to that ride that has those mobility capabilities. In terms of the first part of the question, I'm trying to remember.
What was the first part? Help us out.
Well, coordinating with local governments about pedestrian improvements.
In terms of the prime service itself, probably not specific to that, but there's always ongoing conversations, I'd say, with our local governments. We're actually a joint powers organization among 3 city local governments. So in a way, we kind of work for all 3, and so we're pretty well integrated with city staff whenever they're looking at new development plans, trail plans, comp plan updates. We're very much involved in that discussion as well.
Question about fare collection. I know you mentioned you can pay, I think, with the app and online, and that you take credit cards on the bus. The question is, do you also take cash on the bus, and do you have the standard GFI fare box, or do you use some sort of cash box?
Cash is king. We take it. But our sophisticated is a little cash box. It's not the GFI full-blown thing. So that's one component on the cash front. We also have something called go-to cards that we're trying to get desperately the hardware for that. So if you buy a fixed route go-to card, you can tap it on both of our stored values, so you can tap it on both of our systems. We're not quite there yet because our big brother there, Metro Transit, has just put in an order for 150 of them. So we're light on that, but yeah, we take cash. They're little cash boxes, and it is what it is.
That's all the questions that have been put into the chat box. If anyone has a lingering question, please go ahead and send that in. Blair, if I could have you switch the presenter back over to me, and we'll wrap up here. So, again, I just wanted to remind everyone that we record the webinars, and that link should come out within a week or so. Our next webinar will come up on January the 8th, so be looking for information about that. It will be Creative Engagement Strategies, Mixing It Up. We will have 2 transportation planners from CATS in Charlotte, and they'll be talking about how they have used creative engagement to talk about their bus planning services using StreetMix and the Remix tool. So that will give us some great insight into some new tools and how people are using those with their transit planning. We, again, if you did not, let us know where you joined us from, particularly if you have more than one person that has logged in. That helps us keep track of how many people are enjoying these webinars and signing in. If you were just by yourself, we have captured your information and email just by logging in. So if you didn't do that earlier, please take a chance to do that before we close out here. We again thank our friends there in Southwest Transit for sharing their experience. It's certainly, there's nothing as comprehensive, I think, in terms of what y'all are doing, and looking forward into the future about how to serve those needs. So we appreciate you sharing all that with us. And thank you, NCDOT, and for allowing us to have these Lunch and Learn webinars. And with that, we'll sign off and say thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again in January.